Oh, Merry Christmas.
I'm going to call to order this February 19th, 2025 special commissioners meeting. Are there any adjustments to the agenda?
I move to accept the agenda as presented.
I'll second that.
Discussion. Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Public comment. Is anybody here to make a public comment? Hearing none. Approval of the minutes.
I'm going to move to approve the minutes of the February 4th, 2025 Commissioners' regular meeting as presented.
I'll second that.
Discussion. Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Airport, good morning, Leroy.
Clicking buttons here. Good morning. Good morning. Couple of things. The first one is a request approval for the modification to Jacob's contract. This was due to the architect's fee coming in higher than their estimate.
And the funds for this are being paid where?
Yeah, this is all. Yeah, this is all going to be AIP or
Yep.
actually BIL money, but bipartisan infrastructure law money.
Do they have, is there any kind of, what's the timetable for this anyway?
The planning part of the project should be going to bid the end of March. So that's stage one, and then well, that's actually the bidding for the actual construction. So realistically, we might be able to start, and that's one of the other discussions that I had on here was there's a couple of ways that they're posing to start the project, but I'm a little uncomfortable on starting the project prior to us having a grant for the project. And that's actually the second item on the list is they're saying if we hold off till late, it might be a 26 build instead of a 25 build. Again, but the way things are right now, without having a grant in hand for the project, I'm a little uncomfortable putting Hancock County at risk of having to pay the whole project and not have the money available to us.
That other item on the agenda has to do more with the snow removal.
Right.
building.
Right, and actually, yeah, okay, yeah. Sorry, I have three projects that we're working on, and I got them a little confused there.
But
So.
we don't expect the window project to really be affected by that, correct?
Correct. Yeah, the window project is a solely airport improvement project, and that's.
So, go ahead.
I'm gonna make a motion to approve the modification number 1 to the Jacobs contract for the terminal building window project due to an updated architectural quote of $24,237, bringing the total of the project to $131,503.21. And to authorize the chair to sign the modification of
I'll second that.
By way of discussion, Leroy, this motion still doesn't, is this motion giving you the authority to go ahead for your grant and start your project?
Different projects, sorry. Yeah, this is a separate project. This is the normal grant process that we have.
This isn't, you're not concerned about the money for this?
I'm not concerned about this one because you know, the bids will go out, we'll get the bids, they'll award the contract, they'll send in the grant, all of that will be normal.
Okay.
It's the next one that I'm concerned about.
Okay. Motion on the floor. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Now, with regards to the SRE building, how much of that, Leroy, if we started immediately with the process, and they started building as soon in the process, as soon as they could, how much of that would get physically done and would we be responsible for paying for by the time the grant came out?
So what Jacobs is estimating is we would be probably 2 months worth of work before the grant. This one is, this one's a little different because it's a different funding package. This was the bipartisan infrastructure law money that we was receiving that we didn't use. So technically we've already been awarded the money, but we still have to go through a process of getting a grant for it. So we have basically we have about $4 million sitting in reserve for bipartisan infrastructure project. And this was what we was setting it aside for, was this particular project.
Okay, my question is, Leroy, is if we went ahead, worst case scenario, at some point during the construction, we found out we were not gonna get the money. How much do you think we would have expended and have to come up with to pay off and stop the building and pay off the debt at that moment?
I would say the groundwork would be done. Paving, foundation. Realistically, maybe $1 million, $1.5 million.
And you don't have funds for if,
Well, remember we go back to some of our, we'll call it our COVID money. Our airport, we had two grants, 55 and 56 were operating cost grants, reimbursements that we was able to take our operating costs we had for X years, send in all of those, basically send in all of those receipts to, to the grant, and they reimbursed us. So we have the 56 is completed. That was the last one. I think that was a 1,049,000, give or take. So none of that money has been expended yet. So realistically, that's just sitting in an account somewhere. Monica has it set in, an account. 55, we expended a little bit of money out of. That was 1,003,000, I believe. I think we're at somewheres around $800,000, $900,000 in that that hasn't been allocated or spent. So do we have money? Yeah, we probably would have enough money in those two accounts to take care of it. One thing I'm a little concerned about is the easement project that's on the fence. The easement project we have to pay up front. So we haven't they haven't even started the negotiations to buy these easements. We're looking at them, most of the 11 easements are running around $20,000, give or take, for their easements. So we have to front that money, that up front. And honestly, I was kind of setting this windfall from COVID money aside to make sure we had that. That's all reimbursable, but we've got to pay it up front. So I wanted to make sure we have enough money to pay for those easements.
yeah, but at the rate you're talking, you're only less than $250,000, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's what now?
And we still have some money, a pretty good chunk of money in the checking account too. So
what happens if this does get put off till 2026? Do you expect a significant increase in the cost of that project?
that's what the issue is with listening to Tim at Jacobs. That's his concern, is if this gets put off to 26, there'll be 10, 15, 20% increase in the cost.
Can you cover that increase in 26?
What's that?
Can you cover that increase, that 20% increase in 26?
That'll all be part of the grant. You know, the grant, the money will just be higher. Where, and these are, I want to say that these are 2.5% match on that, these grants. Just, you know, they're 95, 2.5, 2.5, I believe, on the 25 and 26 grants, rather than 5%.
Michael, the COVID money has to be expended by a certain date. Remember what that
Yeah,
is?
by the end of 26.
Uh,
For those committed
yeah.
funds.
The bipartisan infrastructure money, we have to spend that, correct? The COVID money that we have is I'm using the word COVID, it's not really COVID money, it was airport infrastructure grant or something to that, they called it.
Okay, so it's not,
The first one, we've already been fully reimbursed for. We have the money. He's on to it. So he has that money in bank.
but that's not ARPA.
No,
Okay, so
That's not-
that can stay there until.
yeah,
Okay.
Yep.
So gentlemen, it sounds to me like the risk is starting the project, losing the grant money. Leroy's gonna come up with either side of $1 million to pay off what work has been done at that point. Which of course is not good, except that we could make this a long-term capital project and continue in phases if we wanted to over the years. But that's the worst case scenario. And he can cover that with his COVID money, whatever he wants to call that. And if we don't, the project's gonna be 20% higher, it's gonna be a year later, and I don't know.
Yeah, that's a tough call.
Well, it's not like we're going to be facing $1 million debt that we can't pay.
Correct.
End up paying the $1 million for work that had been done. But I still think that we could salvage the project with some creative thinking, perhaps over a period of years in phases, and still have an SRE building in a few years, and maybe additional grant money in the future. I don't know.
Yeah, my gut feeling is that's the very worst case scenario. My gut feeling, I really feel that this is just going to go off as a normal project once we get, you know, past the 2 months or whatever, and the grant goes into place. We get reimbursed for the monies that we spent, and you know it charges forward like any other project. That is the best case scenario.
John, what do you think?
It makes me pretty nervous to start it without being sure what's gonna happen with the grant. So has all the information been sent in to do the grant already?
No, because we don't have the bids haven't gone out, so we don't know what the bids are going to come back at being. So we don't, you know, we can't ask for money because we don't know what that money is we need to ask for, if that makes sense.
And what is there about this grant process, Leroy, that gives you a lot of assurance you're gonna get your money?
Well, with the way the government is right now, that is my concern.
No, I mean, under normal situations.
Normal situations, that's, you know, it's almost assured you're going to get your money, but in this particular situation, again, we're looking at a different funding avenue, that the money has already been set aside for the Bar Harbor Airport in the federal process. In some of the data I sent you, it showed what we have for availability of that bipartisan infrastructure law money. And I believe it was right around 4 million was left available. We had used 200,000 of it, give or take. Because the grant, they pulled that money out to take care of the planning process, which is where we are now. So this thing goes in two stages. We have a planning, bidding, and then we have the construction. So it's the construction phase.
Yeah, with regards to, this is federally, congressionally approved, correct?
Yes, yes.
Take congressional action to change it?
I would say yes, but you know, remember what the president's doing with a stroke of a pen right now. That's my concern. If we was in a little different time and, you know, executive orders weren't be thrown around and stopping grants, and, you know, I reached out to the FAA, you know, a few weeks ago, and they said, you know, they don't have any guidance yet on, you know, the federal government stopping grants.
And what risk we can do?
We're gonna complete this project no matter what, at some point.
Do you think no matter what happens, Leroy, we can complete this project somehow, some way, at some point?
I think so. The other side of that is if we completed this project on our own, meaning Hancock County completed the project would be much less than $4 million. Because remember, we're working on federal wages, we're working on federal guidelines to do this. So that runs the bill up significantly. You know, if we went to Shea or somebody and says, what can you throw us up a building for? I'll bet you, you know, without being federally funded, I bet you it'd be a lot less money.
So Sam's question is there a way somehow, some way that we would build this even if we didn't get our grant money?
I think yes. Whether we shrink it to make it happen, you know, we could cut a few things out of it to make it happen, but my gut, yes, and bottom line is we need to make it happen somehow or other, because, you know, we need to get a building where we can put a sweeper, where we can buy a new sweeper. You know, we've had problems with this one that we've got now. You know, the other problem is that, you know, it gets snow in it, it freezes up, you know, you're out there chipping snow out of the broom to get the broom to spin because it can't go in the building.
So,
Go ahead, Sam.
so if the project appears that it's gonna happen at some point, that if we start now and we get the grant, that's great. And if we start now and don't get the grant, we're gonna continue on anyway, eventually.
Yeah, we'll continue on. Maybe it'll reduce the building a little bit, but yeah, we definitely would make that work.
So the work we would do starting now until we find out whether we get the grant or not would not be wasted work, correct?
I would say no, it would not be wasted work because we'd have to do it anyway.
So Sam, are you in favor of proceeding with the work?
I am.
I am too, John. One more chance to talk us out of it if you want to.
So is there action that has to happen on our part?
So do you need action today on this?
I think we should take an action on it. That way it's, you know, everything is perfectly clear.
John's gonna need some help with a motion that would satisfy you.
I think the motion would be just to start the project. You know, oh, I gotta find that email. I think it'd just be a move forward motion. Move forward on the SRE building.
A motion to move forward on the construction of the SR, of snow removal equipment building.
Yeah.
John, you comfortable with that? Sure. Give him just a second to type out a motion here.
That's okay. That's okay. This has been a building that's been kicked to the curb for the past about 15 years because there was never any funding for it. And this just happened to be this, you know, this was a perfect storm to get funding. I hate to say that a pandemic was good, but it was good in this particular case.
I was just saying, the motion's gonna be to move forward on the snow removal equipment building uh, project.
Is that
Yeah,
sufficient?
Yeah, I think that's sufficient. Michael, does that work for you?
Yeah, I think we get the idea of where they want to go, the direction, so.
Right, and that was the point of the discussion, yeah.
Yeah, because that's really the idea, to know that you can start submitting stuff, Jacobs can start their work and so on, so.
Yeah.
Like in a second.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
I,
Aye.
All right, got through that. The next one is approval of the emergency response MOU with the town of Trenton. This came to be because the FAA sent us a letter just about a month ago now, giving us 30 days to update our water rescue plan. And we had an MOU with Trenton, but the FAA guy said, well, it's a little old. The name, we'd like you to have a new one. So that's, we've updated the water rescue plan. Once the MOUs get in place, he will sign our updated plan, and then we will get it to all parties.
Okay, so the first MOU is for fire service, the second one is for water rescue.
Yeah, basically the first one is for emergency services. So it could be fire, it could be water rescue, it could be, anything.
So what's in the water rescue specific?
The only difference is we're asking Lemoyne to just,
I'm sorry, I didn't realize there were two different communities.
Yeah.
Hey, gentlemen, what's your pleasure?
I'm gonna move to approve the emergency response MOU with the Trenton Volunteer Fire Department and authorize the chair to sign on behalf of Hancock County.
I'll second that.
Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
I
Aye.
move to approve the water rescue MOU with the Lemoyne Volunteer Fire Department and authorize the chair to sign on behalf of Hancock County.
I'll second that.
Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anything else, Leroy?
no, that's it for me. We're getting a little tired of pushing snow out here, but
Oh, come on, this is winter time in Maine.
I know you're loving it for the snowmobile, but oh my gosh,
We're doing a good job. Thank you.
thank you.
Morning, Tim.
One, just one quick thing, just accept resignation of Lane Rush, effective February 15th, 2025.
So moved.
Motion made.
I'll second that.
Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Morning, Dennis.
Morning, gentlemen.
Now, the site work for this geotechnical site work, you sent out the EOC building fund. It's that contract we have with building?
No, this is, comes recommended by the architect. And we will pay for this directly rather than paying for the markup.
And what's the EOC fund?
The money set aside for the emergency operations center, whether it be ARPA or
The funds we pulled out, is that the funds we pulled out from?
Community benefit,
community benefits.
which was what, 25,000?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Not our one.
That's not our fault. That was to take into consideration any ongoing expenses because it was
Wait
post-budget
a minute,
time.
that's not EOC, that's the Hancock site.
Yeah, site, yeah.
Okay, that's not
No,
EOC.
yes, see, the
That's not-
terminology gets,
Right, well, we should be referring to that as the Hancock site development, money.
Yeah, and that's not the goal.
And you don't want that out of your,
No,
you want this out of the $2 million EOC grant, money.
yes,
and that's all been dedicated to that contract, the $3.7 million contract. So it's not like we can pick out a piece of that. Because the contract is 3.7, correct?
yes, the goal is, I think, is that we would save money if we paid for this directly as opposed to,
No, we've already guaranteed LMA and Shea 3.7 million. We can't reduce that by 8,500, can we?
well, that's the question, isn't
So
it?
I think the larger question is, was this project originally part of that 3.7 that you had the contract with?
That is my question.
I understood, or I thought from our discussion, that basically this was
Oh,
something
that's
that,
my mistake.
that originally wasn't part of it.
I don't know.
So
It
that
should
is the
be,
question.
it should be, because we don't need an EOC site for for the EOC building. We don't need a.
No, this is,
For the
this is
Hancock
for
site.
our
We need it just for
project,
this
yes,
EOC
you're right.
building, so it should come out of that.
Yeah, that's my mistake. So we think this should come
You need to talk, we need to have a chat with
from a
Charlie,
different source.
to Charles, and see if that could be covered by the $3.7 million contract that we have with him and Shea.
Right, and you,
Yeah, I mean, if it's part of the original scope, then definitely. But if it
it's
wasn't part
it's
of it.
part of
then
the work
that's-
that needs to be done in preparation for building our building.
That reason it should come out of that 3.7.
Yeah, I mean, and I would assume and hope that the engineer or architect had obviously included that as part of their calculation.
They did.
So then,
And
yeah.
they're the ones that's requiring it, correct?
Yes.
We're not requiring it to develop the Hancock site.
So in effect, what we've done here is, this is kind of a short circuit. We need to take this through a different channel through,
Yeah, I mean, I
through
think
the
I think the
contractor.
contractor would have to be responsible if that was one of his.
So let me bring it, there's no urgency on this.
Okay.
Let me bring it back to you in that way, that
If-
conforms to what,
Yes, my opinion is that if Charles said, yes, this, we'll have to pay for this out of the contract, we'll have to find 8,500 savings somewhere else. That's part of the contract, it doesn't have to come back to us, that's part of the work that we're contracted with him for. So.
Sure.
So the question is if it's one of the deliverables, basically. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yep. And because of that, it doesn't require our approval.
Very good.
Good, that was easy.
Thank you.
Get well.
Will do.
So we have the recapitulation information we need. What is your pleasure, gentlemen?
Sign the recapitulation assessment of county taxes as presented.
I'll second that.
Discussion. Hearing none, all in favor?
I,
Aye. Having done that, we now can set the taxes can be sent out for the communities. And so we need to set a due date. Those have to be back to us and to decide on the delinquent date for which interest is set. What's your pleasure, gentlemen?
So it sounds like historically the date has been September 1st. Just a second.
They would be overdue when?
Per statutes, 892A, 892A indicates interest shall accrue on all unpaid balances of the county tax that are then due beginning on the 60th day after the date of payment set by the county commissioners, pursuant to 38 section 606. So you'd be looking at the 60th day after you set up, which is what, the
November
31st?
October
Yeah,
31st.
October 31st?
Yeah.
That's the 60th day, right? So November 1st would be the first day that we would assess interest, correct?
Right.
Okay, so November 1st.
And then the interest rate for the past few years has been 4%.
Yeah, but they stay the same.
That's your pleasure.
I think they invested big money on that.
We only have a few towns that go a couple weeks into November.
Have we followed through and assessed that interest?
No, we haven't. the 19th, the 22nd.
We're not enforcing it anyway.
Well, we,
I can make that change. I'll make it happen this year if they're not.
I'm concerned somebody might not. Let's go through with the mechanism.
All right, I'm gonna move to set the tax due date to September 1st, 2025, with the 4% rate of interest. It shall apply to delinquent taxes committed during the taxable year, if not received by November 1st, 2025.
I'll second that.
Was there a rate set?
Did you say 4%?
I said 4%.
We have 3 towns that went past November 5th.
Just by a couple weeks. Same 3 times every year. Have a chat with them, tell them it might get tough this year.
Okay.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, Monica. Michael, you have an issue with well policy, huh?
I wouldn't necessarily say issue, but just clarification, maybe consensus building in terms of what was, or how this comes out. There were basically a couple of different items. One, on the maintenance side, they were seeking clarification on if a decision closed during the day, during that 8 to 4 time period. And that's kind of the section 5, which I gave you a copy again of the collective bargaining agreement with the RCC dispatch unit. Mentions the time period, basically 8 a.m. to 12 a.m., so that 12-hour period. Commonly referred to as day shift, night shift, first shift, second shift. It doesn't matter what you call it, but the reality is normally that 8 to 4 period is when the doors are usually open here to the public. People are coming and going and have access available. And then in the evening, it mainly on the county portion in terms of non-essential, you use that term, but people that aren't required to be here regardless, would be the maintenance crews. So there was a little bit of confusion in terms of how that decision is made and who makes it and how it impacts. And Dennis was seeking some clarity on that as well. Yesterday, we had another question come up, so I did contact Commissioner Clark to just ask him about that in terms of the language that was in the contract to be reminded of how that worked. And he had mentioned that we had discussed at some point about specifically stating when that time period was. Because the closures could be different. It could be 2 hours. Like we know at the end of the day, the storm's gonna start getting worse. We wanna get people home before it's dark and the roads get really bad. So the extension isn't gonna just necessarily be all the daytime employees are going home at, say, 2 o'clock. It also may require us to say to the nighttime employees, well, you know, our best advice guidance is you not come in because of the circumstances. Or if you come in, you know, you'll get paid based upon that. If you don't want to come in, which is like a voluntary consideration, then you have to use your own time. So the circumstances could vary. But I think some of the issue was not having a definition in terms of what that time period really encompasses and not automatically assuming it, because it does reference in the agreement about the 8 to 4, if you close early, it makes mention of that. But trying to make sure that it's understood, like what this time period applies, and it's not just automatic. I think the union's concern wasn't automatically just you close during the day and then the nighttime people, regardless of what they do, would never get.
Well, I think because when we negotiated, I think we all had the same idea of what it was gonna be, but I think the issue that we've come across, and I'm not saying it's good, bad, or whatever, is that I think we operate under the assumption that if you closed early, that maintenance wasn't coming in, or the night crew wasn't coming in. But what seems to be happening is that they're always coming in. I'm not saying it's good, bad, or different, but it throws a monkey wrench into trying to determine when the night shift will get that extra pay. Because if they're gonna have someone coming in most of the time,
Dennis isn't here, is he?
so if they're having someone come in most of the time, that throws all that language into chaos. And then we also have the language about, you know, when the courthouse closes, well.
Probably, and Michael and I talked about this yesterday, so. And I do remember we talked about, there's a couple of things scenarios that we didn't think about. Nevertheless, it seems to me, regardless of what we said before, and consistent with maybe what we thought, is that sometime between 8 in the morning and midnight at night, there has to be a designation of what hours that would be considered closure.
Right.
Okay? So, and somebody's got to do that, and my first suggestion is that up to Michael.
Right.
He can consult with the JA, he can consult with, the courts, whatever. But anyways, at some point, he'll say, okay, we're gonna close at 2 o'clock this afternoon. The storm's gonna be all evening. So it's going to be from 2 in the afternoon to midnight. Anybody that has to work during that time, essential workers and whatnot, will get time and a half. Anybody that can stay home, non-essential, will get their straight pay.
Right.
Now that, to me, seems to be a clear.
Yeah, I think if that works for the
Yeah,
year.
as long as there's some clear, because I mean, I think going back to it, we all were on the same page as what we were thinking. I just when it got kind of trying to determine, it got called into question, and just trying to find some way to make sure that it's done equitably and, and I'm okay with that. I mean, if he puts out, we're closing and this will cover, I mean, would you
Yeah,
propose it or?
I think what I probably have to do is part of the process, send a notification out to you or the other steward for the union anyway, that, we made this determination. We're obviously not gonna advertise to the public that we're closed for hours beyond the normal public hours, because that would start confusing people left and right. So it would be more, I think, of the notification process, so you're aware, look, I made this determination, and obviously part of this process is that Dennis, and this is kind of what we did with the last storm as well, Dennis and I, or Dave, would have to kind of talk about what kind of made this last storm a little unique is that we were open basically all morning, and there was a full court session, at both courts. There were a lot of people coming in and out, so really the maintenance staff was forced with either having to hold somebody over and compelling them to work, which they didn't have maybe enough to do that necessarily right away, or let people come in because the cleaning had to get done. But they did give them the option, and a couple took advantage of just coming in and doing the work that needed to get done.
Well, I
So
think
that may not normally be a
I
process.
think compelling maybe is the wrong word.
Well, yes, no,
In other
sorry,
words,
but
they're not permitted to stay. They're basically, they're gonna have to follow through with their obligation, their
Yeah,
scheduled
before-
obligation. And that raises another issue, really, that Mike and I talked about yesterday. It's my opinion that coming in, and working during the closure period is compensable by time and a half.
Mhm.
However, you're getting that time and a half. So if you had a guy working an extra shift, dispatch,
Yeah,
that time and a half is gonna cover that storm closure pay, because you get time and a half for working, whether it's
Well, yeah.
overtime or whether it's closure time. Because here's the thing, that guy doesn't have to work. In other words, he isn't scheduled to work. So-
true, but if he's not scheduled to work, but if he reneges on it, then you're yanking someone else back, and you're gonna have to pay them time and a half and give them the time back. Because then the person that was off,
I know it, but he comes in, he gets his time and a half.
yeah, but it's kind of like the holiday thing, and I know that's a separate issue, but it's kind of,
Yeah, it's kind of like, but the problem is that it's too much like double dipping compared to the holiday.
yeah, I get
You're
that,
guaranteed a holiday pay, and if you come in and work, that's a really separate issue.
yeah, it is.
But I think for the purposes here is that people already on time and a half are not gonna get additional half time
Right.
for storm closure pay. So,
I
we
get
need
that, yeah.
if you think about that and you want to bring that up again during negotiations.
Yeah, I think it's probably between that and holiday, we probably need to look at that, but,
Yep, okay, but for the purpose of clarifying the policy as existing, I think the only thing we really need to do is acknowledge the fact that Michael is going to designate the storm closure period. And then whoever works during that period will get time and a half for whatever reason. And if there's a Dennis having people coming in when there's nothing to do, that's a management issue. He's gonna have to decide. when he
and I'm not trying to like get involved in their business, I just say that was kind of like, I think what we originally had in mind, that was gonna be like a determining factor, and
yeah, and I think that was the initial threshold that kind of was used that last
right,
one.
not realizing,
That we actually had people that were.
right, still coming in, yeah.
So do it this way, to clarify and doing it this way, it keeps this part out of that maintenance
Yeah.
discussion. So it
Right.
doesn't make, not say it make a difference, but it's not necessarily tied. So maintenance could still bring people in, but that wouldn't be the kick-off threshold for your
Right.
hours to kick in.
But if maintenance had a scheduled worker, that was do the work before the midnight shift, and we had a storm closure during that period, then it's up to maintenance to decide whether or not he comes in, or he can take the night off the bed. He comes in, he gets time and a half. He stays home, it's straight time pay.
Right.
Storm closure pay. So,
Oh, sorry.
no, go ahead.
Well, the other thing that I think was a little confusing, and there was some desire to clarify, I guess, is that the way that it was written was that it was based on the hours that they actually worked during the time period of the closure.
Hmm.
So it wasn't just, if you worked that day and we were closed 6 hours, every single person on that day received the 6 hours, because that's not the way that I read the language in here.
And that wasn't the original intent.
Okay.
I think because we knew that, like, say you had a 2-hour delay coming in, you know, and then the weather's fine after 10 a.m., you're not gonna give the night crew the time
That
to have.
happens, okay.
And you acknowledge that,
That was not the
daytime-
original intent.
We had a daytime storm that got over at 6 in the evening, roads were clear by 8. He wouldn't designate till midnight just because he got into the overtime.
And by the same token, if the storm starts at 4, you weren't giving the people that worked during the day. I mean, that was not our original intent, I know.
But if storm started at 4 and he said, we want to get people out of here by 2 so they can get home. Before
Yeah.
the storm starts, then he's gonna have a 2-hour storm closure period for the day shift.
Right,
But then he'll have to decide if he's gonna go to midnight, it's gonna be full 8 hours for the night shift.
yeah, so long as, I mean, you're making that determination, let us know what it
It's
is.
conveyed to you. And if everybody's okay with it, I mean, I think that's what we.
So, on the maintenance side of Michael Deuce, if, we had the kind of the typical storm that happens
Yeah.
overnight into the mid-morning or whatever, and you decide, yeah, we're gonna have the kind of regular county offices are gonna be closed. But kind of looks like, you know, it really stops at 11 or 12 o'clock. The plan is still to have maintenance.
So I think in that case, we'd be telling maintenance, depending on the situation. Now, again, some of that's in consultation with Dennis, because he may be able to be in a spot where, I mean, I think the concern would be, our question would arise, well, do they need to come in, because what are they gonna be doing? Well, one would presume that he would have work to be able to, even if it's not just cleaning, there would be stuff that could be done here, so. But the assumption under that condition would be the storm closure actually ends at this point in time, and then, in all likelihood, if we're canceling for the day, the reality is basically the closure would probably be until 4, because you're obviously not going to bring people back in
Yeah.
at 2
But,
o'clock
I
in the
mean,
afternoon.
yeah.
But for the night show after 4, then yes, when the people would be scheduled to come on, then they would be basically told, you know, report to duty as usual at that time, so.
And I think that might be considered a little inequity, but if that wouldn't have a daytime closure, even though the storm was over noontime, roads were clear by 2, the closure's gonna go to 4 o'clock, and that'll call people in for 2 hours.
Right.
But if the storm was an early morning, midday storm, and it was cleaned up by 3, and he said the closure is over at 8, then the night shift is working, gets 4 hours of time and a half, 4 hours straight. Understand that?
I do,
Yeah.
Yeah. just whatever the time of the inclement weather is, I guess, as long as we're getting, I mean, do we need to clarify that in any language, or do we just operate out of understanding?
I tried to see it, it's not specific enough, it says that Michael is going to determine the closure time, and I think to make this policy work, we're gonna have to all agree or understand what the closure period is. And then we can apply the benefit, correct?
Yeah, I think that's the only ultimately fair and equitable way to make that work. And is that a little bit,
I mean, that's also like us just being, I mean, you're gonna make that call
yeah,
and do it, you know?
I mean, the reality is I'll have to take my crystal ball out, set it
Yeah,
down, and try to figure out what's gonna be the appropriate time period, and then,
And you know, my feeling is that if you're, I won't call it generous, but if you don't short, I don't think anybody's ever gonna.
No.
You know what I mean? If the roads are fine by 2 o'clock and, you know.
It's got to pass a straight face.
Takes you 2, who's gonna complain, you know, so. Are we okay?
yeah, I think that helps me, and we'll communicate that, that'll become part of the process. I'll just reach out to you or anybody else that you want on the union's part. And, you know, that just becomes one more notification as part of the process.
Sure.
And then we'll make sure that information as part of payroll gets relayed back to them with the process. And we should be good.
Thank you, Roy.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Michael, do you have any comments this morning for us?
I have no.
Gentlemen, do you have any comments you'd like to make before we close? Tammy, all set? If not, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
Discussion, hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.